And good evening, everybody. This is Tony Fabiano coming to you from the studio at Guilford Community Television. And I have what for me would be an unusual program. I typically know a little something about whatever group I'm interviewing or whatever individual people are involved in, whatever they're involved in. But in this particular case, I know absolutely nothing. So it's going to be kind of interesting how I get this information out and make it understandable, not only for you, but for me. And I'm dealing with actually two representatives from the hobby of ham radio. So let me start by introducing them. I have Jim Clark to my immediate left and Sid Gale. And both of these gentlemen have been involved with ham radio for a number of years. So we're going to get kind of a perspective of what's happened to the hobby, as well as how important it can be in an emergency situation. So let me start, first of all, gentlemen, by asking you, think back to the very beginning. What got you interested in being involved with ham radio? How did that happen?
For me, it was after my three daughters were out of the house and I had a room that I could set up my operation in. And that was about 31 years ago.
Okay, but why ham radio? You could have done anything. You could have gone into woodworking. You could have been,
Okay, I was with the Episcopal Church here in Guilford, and I was on the finance committee, being a banker from that time.
I should mention Jim was with Guilford Savings Bank for 120 years.
Well, 31 years.
You started young, though.
31 years, yeah. Before I retired, but that was it.
And he looks good for his age.
Great.
For 100 years, right. But we had a meeting at the fellow's house, and I noticed the radio equipment on his shelf, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about it. And he said, after the meeting, if you like, I'll give you a demonstration. And he did. And he made a link with a fellow from Australia and a fellow from California. And the
when you say he made a link,
he made a contact.
Now, in today's, the word link means something a little different when it comes to your computer. So
that's true. So yeah, he made a contact, a verbal contact with a fellow. One fellow was in Australia and the other one was in California. And the three of them were talking simultaneously back and forth to each other. And that hooked me.
You said, wow.
I did. I said, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And because when I was in the service, I had Morse code background. That was the main thing that you had to do, get 5 words a minute minimum in order to get into the hobby and get your license, your basic license. And then the more that you got on upgrading as far as speed on your code, which is all Morse code at that time, the more you had ability to do, the different things that you could accomplish with that.
Let's not move ahead of ourselves.
Right,
We're going to talk about all this stuff.
Right.
Sid, how many years for you?
It took a little more time for me to germinate. My interest in radio probably started when I was a kid. My father was a police officer in New Haven. He'd come home sometimes for lunch with the cruiser. I'd sit in the seat and listen to the chatter on the radio, and I was just fascinated.
That's interesting. Yeah.
1978, the night before the blizzard, I bought my CB radio. That's where kind of I started out, I guess. And the day of the blizzard, I was coming home from Hartford in the middle of it, going over the Meriden Hump on I-91 in total blackout or whiteout conditions. And it was just fascinating to hear the chatter all around me.
On the CB radio?
On the CB, giving some sense of what was going on, where there were problem areas and the kind of thing. You couldn't see anything, and yet you knew everything that was happening around you.
But CB is Citizens Band.
CB is Citizens Band. And
CB much higher upgrade from that.
CB kind of got raw after a while. I mean, just about anybody who wants to can get on CB. The difference between CB and ham is that ham requires a license with an exam, with ethical principles of usage. And so it's a more tightly controlled community.
All right, then let's talk then, if somebody's watching right now and they think they might have an interest in this, what does it take for them to get involved? How can they become a ham operator?
Well, the first thing they have to do is to pass an exam. And this manual here is the one I use to get my tech license. It's about 300 pages. And out of that book, you're going to be tested on 35 questions. Right. Okay,
out of
pardon? Who tests you?
Someone who's a
VEC. Someone like Jim, who's a VEC, which is a volunteer education coordinator.
Yeah.
And they are volunteers who are hams that administer the exams on behalf of the FCC.
Correct.
Okay. Now, how did you get to be a VEC?
I volunteered for it. I had the upgrade.
To who? What organization said, okay, you can be the volunteer?
ARRL pretty much.
The league
that,
itself,
right?
American Radio Relay League out of Newington. is the headquarters for America.
All right. So if somebody's watching, they have to study.
Yep.
They have to take a test.
Yeah.
They
Correct.
have to pass the test,
Plus code.
right?
No longer code.
No, not now, but
Not
it
now,
was at that time.
Okay,
Yes.
but now today.
Yeah.
We're
Today you
talking
don't
about
have to.
somebody out there who knows nothing about
Right.
this. Like
Today
I
you
do,
don't
they
have
might
to-
want
you
to get
don't-
involved.
Right.
Is there widespread interest in ham radio with, with the amount of technology that's out there today? The number of distractions that a person has if they want to go off on a tangent in terms of technology?
Well, I guess there are two questions there, and one of them is there any point to ham radio, given all the other options there are? So we've got
Yeah.
your typical smartphone today, and then you've got one of these, okay? This can reach, this is about 3.3 watts of output. This is about 5 watts of output.
It is 5
Which
watts.
means,
Which means you can go a lot farther with this one than you can with this one. This
Okay.
one will get you to the next cell tower. But if you're out in God's country, and there are no cell towers, this one won't do you much good.
that will.
This one will.
What allows that to communicate?
Partly because of its greater power than this, and you can up this. I can put an amplifier on this and get it up to 30 watts, which gets me tremendous distance. If there are repeaters in the area, for example, with 2 repeaters in the state of Connecticut and radio like this, I could hit any place in the state of Connecticut, just
Okay,
about.
while you're holding that in your hand, continue to hold it.
Mm.
We talked about, that it would take a minimal, well, maybe not minimal, amount of study, pass a test, get licensed. What does that cost?
Well, this particular radio, at the time I bought it, cost about $350, and with all the other accoutrements you'd want to be operational, probably a total of $500. That's a second battery, a microphone.
Is there an entry-level radio that costs
Yeah,
less than that?
yeah.
Oh,
The
yes.
Chinese have come out with. The Chinese have 2 companies that have come out with radios that are in the $125 range, and they're good for somebody who is thinking of getting into the hobby but doesn't want to invest a lot. And let me say that it's a lot cheaper to get into this hobby than it is boating or golf.
No question.
And but
$300 for
Yeah.
30,000 for a
Yeah.
boat.
on the other hand, if you like to spend money as a measure of how great your hobby is, you've got the sky is the
No
limit.
limit.
But yes,
whatsoever.
so with the 2 Chinese rigs, they're acceptable. They're not as good as some of the longer-standing companies, but I'm sure they'll come that way in time. But they're a good way to get in at the lowest cost and find out if you really like the hobby.
In the town of Guilford, how many people would you say are involved with the hobby?
There are currently 60 licensed amateur radio operators on the FCC's database right now in Guilford. I would say
Is that
probably.
a stable number over the years? Has that fluctuated?
I don't have a basis to say, but I imagine it's pretty stable
It's stable.
because.
Yeah, I'd say it's around
yeah.
the same, yeah.
And I would say of those, there's probably 25 who are really active in the course of time.
Right.
What do you
And
mean
active
really
in-
active?
Well, active in different aspects of it. For example, Jim is on the
Every
on the
day.
radio every day,
Every day
running
I'm on, yeah, with traffic.
national traffic system.
Right.
I
What
get
are you doing on the radio every day?
We are a group that is able to pass messages throughout the state of Connecticut and into Connecticut. There's 2 different nets, as they're called, and I'm on both of them very regularly. In fact, I've got my logbook right here, which tells the different times.
Now, you said we.
Right.
Who's we?
It's any ham that is licensed to be able to go onto the frequency and talk. They can't do it as a novice, which is a very basic, but they can do it as a general class or advanced class or extra class, and that's when they're upgrading by doing the studying and taking more tests, and the FCC will grant them more licensing privileges, literally. And what they're doing is taking messages, and I've got this, what's known as a radiogram, and this simplifies kind of messages that you're able to send all over. In other words, we get from out of state, they will come to this net and pass whatever information. 99% of it is like anniversaries, birthdays, congratulations on upgrading, or you need to renew your license. And if there's an emergency, these are the ones you were saying, ARL.
What is ARRL?
American Radio League. Okay,
Okay.
but this is called the radiogram, and these are the numbered ones you have. The ones we do mostly is 50, which you can see on here, is greetings by amateur radio, and a lot of times they start that off with so that they know where it's coming from. And then the message, you can do 71 or I think
Wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New
exactly.
Year.
That's the one we're getting right now, very regularly.
Let me just
But
put
now,
this.
why would I want to do
Because
this? Why not a telephone? Why not text
Because
message? Why not
because
an email?
you're getting in touch with people in the area where it's going to.
Yeah.
It could be from out of state, and it's not costing a thing to make that message sent.
Here's the analogy that may be useful to the viewers. Everybody has played the game in elementary school of telephone, where you start a message at the beginning of the room and you whisper it in succession through the room and see how it comes out at the other end.
Yeah.
Here's what he does in National Traffic Service and why it's important.
By the way, if I was in the middle of that chain, because I'm half deaf, it would really come out in bad.
Absolutely.
It would sound terrible
Absolutely.
on the other end.
So here's what happens in National Traffic Service. The whole point of National Traffic Service is to take a message from point A and get it to point Z
Yeah.
in exactly the same way it started out.
Right.
And in order to do that, you need two things. You need the technology to link all the players.
That's if it's an important message.
But this is the point. What they do 99% of the time
Right.
is to practice the technique so that when they need it desperately, the 1% of the time or less, it works
If
as
you got
it's
a
intended.
hurricane or a tornado or a major storm, you've got information here that says we need help, or we get more people to get out here. We need more people to check out different locations.
Let's apply that to a real life situation. A month or so ago, we went through a hurricane
Yep.
in the town of Guilford, and 75% of the town lost its power,
Yes, it did.
which means if they lost their power, they lost a lot of the communication they would normally have,
Mm-hmm.
including cell phones that go dead,
True.
right? What did you do, or what could you have done in that type of a situation?
We do not require an outlet to plug in order to talk. We have charged batteries that right in the radio itself. This one, I have a little thing at home that I just plug this into an outlet and it charges after 6 hours, and then I unplug it, and then I can walk around the Guilford Green and talk to anybody I want to who's
But
also a ham.
Of what value would that service be?
Well, here's
Give me an example.
here's
of-
what happens,
Yeah.
and the fellow who runs the amateur radio emergency service in this region, Region 2 that we're in, makes the point that although we're called amateur radio emergency service, really what we are is disaster communications, because when we get called out to play, things are really bad. And they can be really bad in two ways. Either the first responders' communication systems have been knocked out, which has happened, and which happened in some cases, not in Guilford, but happened in other areas of the state during Sandy. Or you get a real big disaster, which we did not get in Sandy and we did not get in Irene, but we could have in the future, as New York and New Jersey did.
And
Okay,
911.
and in that case, you have a situation where you have a prolonged post-disaster period, and your first responders and professional emergency personnel are just stripped to the bone to answer the hot things, and they're not available to answer the also important but less critical things. So, for example, if Guilford went out in the middle of January with an ice storm and had the same severity as Irene did, we wouldn't be out for a week. We'd probably be out for 2 or 3 weeks, because it would be that much more difficult to restore power under ice storm winter conditions. In that case, in a town that doesn't have municipal waste management, where people are on wells and septic tanks, life becomes very difficult in the middle of the winter. So you need to open up a
Certainly
number.
different.
You'd need to open up a number of emergency shelters, okay, to be able to handle people. And those emergency shelters would need logistical support in terms of getting supplies in. What hams do in those kinds of situations, and we did during
That's
Sandy.
my next question.
Yeah,
Right.
we did.
What
Yeah.
service are you actually
We
providing?
did in Sandy in some parts of Connecticut, is we will man the communications in the various shelters. We will create kind of a parallel network to the 911 system
Right.
that can handle
The reverse 911 the police use?
No. That's kind of a pre-storm thing. But
Yeah.
but what we would do as a network would be to handle the less vital but also important kinds of communications, so that 911 and the first responder emergency networks can handle the really critical stuff
In
and
other
not
words,
have
we
that
are-
traffic bogging them down.
We are the communicators. That is our main purpose.
But now you have a limited, 60 people in the town of Guilford, for example, have the ability to communicate with you by way of ham radio. You have a limited network. You're not communicating with everybody.
Well, it's even more limited than that, because not all hams necessarily do the things that Jim does or the things that I do. So in my case, my objective within my organization is to build the team of people within Guilford who have the training and the practice and the discipline to do what needs to be done in disaster communications. What Jim does on a daily basis with his national traffic system is to practice the means of communication that are needed to pull people like me together throughout Connecticut, or to make contact beyond Connecticut for a variety of reasons that come up in an emergency. So we're kind of two different disciplines that have to work together in a disaster.
There was a very serious accident the other night in Lyme.
Yes, I heard that on
I would
TV.
assume that you were busy listening or talking or communicating something to somebody as a result of I-95 being shut down for
that's kind
5,
of
6 hours?
And that's where I think Doug Sharafanowicz, the guy I report to, makes the distinction between emergency communications and disaster communications. That was an emergency communication situation. That's what happens with 911. That's what happens within your first responders' daily network system. And they're fully capable of handling that. They don't need assistance from us. Okay? It's when you get into an Irene and Sandy kind of situation that things kind of get out of hand, where I mean, let's face it, our town and state budgets don't allow the staffing of emergency personnel for Irenes and Sandys. They're staffed and equipped for day-to-day circumstances. It's when you get beyond those that their resources are stretched to the limit and beyond, and that's when you need trained volunteers of various kinds, people like us who do communication, other people who know how to run an emergency shelter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, medical personnel, that can come in and augment the skills and the resources of your first responders.
Sid, you came in uniform tonight.
Yeah, these are the gang colors.
And one of the badges that you have is the one on your right shoulder, Shoreline Amateur Radio Club.
Correct.
SARC. What is that?
Well, there are two ways that hams can be involved in the hobby, and the club system is one of those. And there are clubs throughout the state of Connecticut and the country. And the function that the clubs have is it's your opportunity to get together with other hams, especially if you're coming into the hobby. It's good to be with people who can help you along and get you into it and tell you everything that you did not pick up in this. And the second thing that clubs do very importantly is that they support the repeater system, which makes these little radios so valuable. Okay.
What is a repeater?
The repeater system is something where if I'm on the correct frequency and I send a message, the repeater will pick that message up with my measly little 5 watts of power and broadcast it out with more power to a much broader area.
Puts out about 25 watts on an average.
Right, so it gives me much greater reach with this radio than I would otherwise have. In Connecticut, it's particularly important because with our geography, with a lot of hills and valleys, if you didn't have repeaters, you couldn't get far because these radios are line of sight versus his...
But Jim, in your case, you talk to people all over the world.
Yes.
So, so how do you do that? I know that's what this represents, if you want to get a shot of that.
Okay. These are mainly voice contacts. There's a few here that are Morse code contacts from the earlier ones, from my original call sign, when I couldn't do a voice because I didn't have the right licensing at the time. It was my basic license that I had.
But
so
today,
I can only do
when you make contact,
today
you talk to anybody anywhere?
If you're on a certain frequency or a certain band, and the conditions are right, the signals can go literally around the world, depending on conditions. And yes, you can make contact, especially now the one that I'm on most of the time is called the 75-80 meter band, which is all New England. And this book, which is my log book, tells all the different locations that I make contact with on a daily basis, literally. In other words, you can talk to Branford or New Haven, and I think nothing of talking to Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, and I do that almost on a daily basis with what's known as a rag-chew net, which means...
so if you're talking to somebody in Portland, Maine.
Maine, yep, I can do that.
What are you talking about?
You can talk about any subject under the sun, literally.
I mean, is it a social
It's
exchange?
social. It's a rag-chew net is what they refer to it as. rag chew net.
Oh, okay.
And it means that what you usually talk about is weather conditions, the equipment that you're using, how I talk to people that I've talked to for years. I've never met them in person, but I know their voices, I know their call sign, and you can get into these different nets that are literally all over the state and all over the out of state, literally, depending on which ones you're on.
Okay,
But
so that's the hobby aspect.
it's the hobby.
Yeah, and it's
aspect of
also
it, yeah.
another specialty too. Just
Yeah.
like he's NTS and I'm ARES, that's DXing.
Yeah,
That's long distance
long
communication.
distance communication,
And
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't call people by their name. This
No,
person you're talking
you're right.
to in Portland, Maine is
right.
not Joe Murphy.
You're going
He's
by
got
the
a- he's
call
got a-
sign, just like my call
Yeah,
sign
yours is
M1DIO. November 1,
M1DIO.
and you're going phonetics November 1 Delta India Oscar. You've got a special phonetics alphabet all the way through, and that's what you use.
And I've noticed that you can also get a license plate for your car
Yeah,
that has your call
vanity
letter on.
called a vanity plate. You pay
Okay.
a little bit more for it, but anytime you see a car with a license plate and it's got a Thunderbolt
Right.
after the first two letters or numbers, 1 is all New England, 2 is all New York and New Jersey, 3 would be Delaware, down south, 4 would be Florida, 6 and 7 would be out on the West Coast, out in California, Alaska. You can see like Canada. I've made a lot of contacts. I've got Brazil. Now these happen to be CW contacts, Morse code contacts that I made. All
What's
of
a
these.
CW? What is that?
Morse code.
Okay.
In other words, that's the language you're speaking. But you can do it now that I have the upgrade on my licensing. I can do voice, and yeah, you say this, you give your call sign, and if somebody can hear you fine, they give you their signal report, and then location, and then you talk about the equipment you have, your antennas, what your signal strength is, how well they're reading you, and you can carry on a conversation as short as a few minutes or a half hour
You
or an
can say,
hour.
I'm thinking of coming up to Maine next week.
Can you tell me where to park, where it's a good restaurant? Yes.
Yeah, there's also
You can
that-
do all of
that
that, yeah.
aspect of it.
And that would be something that you don't pay anything to have to do. I mean, you're there, you're talking to
But
them.
again, I'm thinking in modern times, in modern jargon, you have Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are friends with each other. They never met. They'll never meet.
true.
They have no clue who these other people are, but they're
Absolutely.
friends.
Yes,
On
exactly.
Facebook,
Oh, yeah.
or they're tweeting on Twitter.
Yep.
Right. I mean,
we were long before Facebook.
Yeah.
We were cool before Facebook.
So you guys were geeks before there were geeks.
Long time
Absolutely.
ago. Yes.
One
You're
thing
still
on,
geeks.
Yeah.
now and forever.
Yeah.
One
It
thing-
is. It's
just
a
a
hobby
question.
that
Just a
lasts.
question of degree. One thing
Yeah.
on the license plates, though, vanity license plates go back to 1955 or so, and they were created for us after the hurricanes then, because ham radio was so important at that time when there wasn't cell phones,
Right.
Yeah.
that the state recognized the importance and created the vanity plates to identify us. That was nice. Today it's very important because with the prohibition on operating a cell phone while you're driving,
Yeah. 56 was the big hurricane.
that
in
license
Connecticut.
plate gives us protection under a law passed this year which allows us to
We
operate
can talk
on the
while
road.
we're in the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what regulations actually control what you say and who you say it to?
The FC.
In other words, if you were to do something that was off color, would somebody monitor that and
Largely-
fine you or pull your
Yeah.
license? or-
Largely,
Yeah.
the hobby self-polices itself.
Yeah.
And if we fail to do that, the FCC will do it
They'll-
for
they'll
us.
come
So
in.
we have a lot of motivation
they can
to
take
keep
your
it
Somebody
equipment
might
away.
report somebody.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. And in fact,
Yeah.
there are times when hams will be critical to identifying somebody who is broadcasting, which is not allowed.
Right.
Broadcasting is where you send out a signal with no intent of someone coming back.
Right.
We're not allowed to do
They're
that.
playing
except
music on the
Right.
frequency, something like that. You're not allowed to do that.
We're not allowed to do that
Now,
except
we
under
talked a little
extreme.
bit about
yeah.
Guilford, and you said
Yeah.
about 50 or 60 people that are involved, and most of those, I guess, are active. Shoreline. What's the shore? Define the Shoreline for me. Shoreline Amateur Radio Club.
Oh, well, the Shoreline Amateur Radio Club, we've got people from Brantford to Old Lyme and up to Essex and maybe a little beyond. We also have people who aren't even in the region, and this goes back to the repeater. A lot of people who are ham radio operators are also, not airline, they're pilots and they're
Boaters.
boaters.
Yeah.
And they find ham radio very valuable in those areas where they couldn't otherwise make contact by cell
Okay, so
phone.
how many members does the Shoreline Amateur
About
Radio Club?
75 right now.
I think we-
dues paid members.
We have
approximately.
I think, 88 dues-paying
okay.
members total.
Okay,
Okay.
now what are the dues?
And the dues are $20 a
$20.
year.
Okay,
plus,
and what's the benefit of me paying $20 to be a member of that?
you get to deal with
Like any organization, if you're
Yeah.
going to pay money, you want to know what the benefit is.
Right.
You're going
you get to hang with a great group of people, and I have to say that one of the things that has always fascinated me in the time I've been a ham is that hams are perhaps the most generous people with what they know and the time they're willing to give you to
Absolutely.
figure things
As
out.
a mentor, right.
Because they take great pride in what they've learned, and it took
passion
them a
for
lot
the
to
And they
learn.
can pass it on. Yeah,
and
they're glad
and
to
in
do so.
taking that pride, they get the best kick out of it by sharing it with you. The other thing you get on a more tangible basis is it supports our repeater in Killingworth and Westbrook, and it's kind of a platform. It's a social platform by which we can say, okay, what do we want to do next in radio?
Yeah, all right, now let's back up to the dues now. Somebody pays $20 to be a member. It's an annual fee.
Yep.
Yes.
What happens to the money? Who controls it? What do you do with the money?
Well, the club controls it like any other club kind
You
of
have a treasurer
organization.
and-
We got
Oh,
a
yes.
treasurer.
What do you
yeah.
do with the money?
We pay for the insurance and the upkeep of the repeaters, and that's pretty much the
phone
major phone bills, which
Yeah.
also relate to the repeaters. And that's pretty much where
Yeah.
most of our dues go. We try to keep it bare bones because not everybody has a lot of money, and we want to make it easy for everybody to be in. The other thing on dues is
Are you in a membership mode right now? You should a membership growth.
always.
Okay,
Always.
Always
so-
looking for new folks to come in, yes.
So if somebody
Hamsley-
watching wants
Yeah.
more information on this,
At the end of
if
this,
they don't have one of these.
at the end of this
How do they
program,
contact you?
at the end of this program, there will be contact information from me personally, and the ARRL website that they can go to learn everything they want.
ARRL is
Amateur Radio Relay League.
Right.
Which incidentally, it's great to be a ham in Connecticut because the league's headquarters is in Newington. And that's a great resource to hams. If you want to see a great antenna farm, it's a place to go.
Oh yeah.
And-
There-
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but you've got a lot of technical assistance there that, unlike any other state, we can just drive right up there and tap it, and
Your communication works off of an antenna.
right.
Okay, and the antenna that you have local, that's an antenna.
That's an
Yes.
antenna.
But is there like a
This is
cell
an
tower
antenna.
somewhere?
Not a cell tower. I mean, that's the other reason why we're so valuable in emergencies, because basically we're self-contained units.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're self-contained
You don't
units.
have to go through a zoning process to get something up so people.
Well,
can be
no. If you are going to do a big rig for, let's say, a home-based,
What's a big rig?
I mean, a big antenna,
How
that
big?
60, 100
okay,
feet.
I have for my main antenna.
Remember, I
it's
know
called-
nothing
Yeah.
about
Okay,
this.
it's the antenna.
That's
it's-
okay.
It's a wire dipole is what it's referred to as. It's center fed. It's 51 feet each leg. In other words, for each side, it's 102 feet long, and I've got it up about 50 feet, I would say. And with that, it's
You have that at your
radiating.
house?
I have it at my house. Oh yes, and it
What did
radiates.
Reggie Reed have to say about that?
Not a
Zoning
problem.
enforcement officer.
You wouldn't even know it was there
No.
if you
Yeah.
if you didn't
wouldn't
know what
see
to
it.
look for.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
you wouldn't even know to look for
But
it.
if you're in a
Yeah.
condo situation, that's another
You got a
issue.
problem. Yeah, a lot of times they want to go
Now,
out.
also to your question, you've got things called Texas towers, which are really large antennas. They can be 60, 100 feet.
Are those
And-
local? People?
I
in
mean,
the
yeah,
area?
you've got people that have towers like
sure.
that, but that's where you get into potential zoning questions in some communities, not
Yeah.
universally. And more importantly, you get into neighbor issues if they think that your transmissions are going to interfere with their TV signals. And that's largely been reduced
Could
or
it?
eliminated. In certain circumstances,
Yeah.
yes, especially if you're a
I
sloppy
mean,
operator.
before cable, I would assume. It's not going to interfere with cable.
Cable eliminates a lot of that. It's when everybody had antennas hanging off their house. That's when you had more problems. But there are also filters that you can put on to eliminate that if they are occurring.
Yeah, but that's probably minimal right now, I would think.
Pretty much, although with people bailing out of cable and getting their digital antennas and going back for free, you may see more of that happening. I don't know what the impact will be.
Okay. We have 20 minutes? We done 20 minutes? Okay. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the fact that you would like to have more people involved in this.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because it's a great hobby, and if people aren't involved, the FCC will send the radio spectrum that we now have to other uses,
Yes.
which would be unfortunate
lose
for
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Because when we lose that spectrum, the society loses the emergency capabilities that
Yeah.
we have.
But
Yeah.
admittedly, you are competing with the new technology and the Facebooks and the Twitters and all of that. You know, people's focus,
Always. But
directed in
Facebook,
a different-
and this is an important thing to understand, Facebook and the internet only work while you've got access to power.
Yes.
Once that goes down,
You're out.
they're worthless.
Yeah.
And that's been proven in Irene and Sandy, okay? And that's why we say the motto of Aries is when all else fails, and it means literally that. We are the last means of organized communication when all other options have failed for lack of power, for damage to equipment or whatever.
Yeah.
When you had the World Trade Centers go down, 9/11 situation, cell phones were useless because everything was to the ground. Ham radio was very active with 9/11. In fact, 2 of our members went to New York and were helping out, participating with the communications.
Now, what service did they provide in that disaster?
Helping out, routing people to different locations, getting help, finding out where other people were looking for people, members of their family that were lost, and they can literally talk to different hams who are in different locations around the city, and were able to contact fire personnel or police personnel saying, we need you at this location, we've got a problem, or we need more ambulances, and they would have somebody at the ambulance location as a communicator and would be able to send the ambulance to whatever location they suggested they do. So they were the only ones that worked. Nothing else worked. Phone lines were down.
Yeah,
And
you have the other
I
thing-
can attest to that because my daughter is a lawyer, but she was a lawyer in Tower 1.
Oh.
And fortunately, she had just gotten to work that morning when the first plane hit.
Oh, my.
And I'm watching it on television, and I'm trying to reach her on my,
Yeah.
I'm trying to call her.
And
I
you,
just
you couldn't get through.
My calls were going to, I don't know how many different people who answered my call, but it wasn't her.
Right.
And I didn't actually get through to her until she was about 20 blocks away,
Oh, my.
going towards
Right.
Midtown.
Yeah.
So here's an example, that particular situation. Your daughter can't get to anybody on the cell phone, even if it's working, because everybody's on the cell
Right, it
phone.
was
Yeah.
But not
overloaded.
everybody can be using it at the same time.
Right.
So she goes into an emergency shelter, somebody's there in with a ham
ham.
station,
Right.
and they send out, at her request, what's known as a health and welfare message, which is somebody on his network sends Jim a message saying, your daughter would like you to know that she's okay and she's at so-and-so emergency shelter, she will be home tomorrow.
And when you're sending out the messages, you've got precedences that you're using, whether it's an emergency, which meaning life and death urgency for anybody that is able to get in touch with an amateur radio operator to get help. You have priority, which can be messages having a time limit or an official message trying to get someone to contact a certain one. Welfare, health and welfare, is finding out the welfare and health of an individual. So, and then routine, which is what we do most 99% of the time, is routine traffic handling, which is, again, messages going
That's
to
something
locations.
that you and your
that I
group
do,
does,
that
but you
does.
don't do that.
I don't do that, no.
No.
And Aries
Yeah.
people don't do that, but we look to the NTS folks to do that
it,
when it
right,
needs to
and
be
we
done.
do it every day.
So that if I were an Aries person in an emergency shelter, okay, I would be talking to an NTS person probably in that shelter and say, okay, we've got a health and welfare message to go out to Connecticut.
Right.
And so they would go through their process of communicating that
Trying to
information.
locate.
Through a network of people that
Right.
are involved. Is that
Yeah,
it?
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had the situation many years ago where a woman during the earthquake out in California where the overpasses collapsed and they could not, she was trying to reach her daughter who was out in that location. The affected area is what they referred to as. And the woman lived up in Hartford and she didn't know how to contact or get contact to her daughter, and they suggested that they go to Guilford Police Department because they thought there were some hams down there. They didn't know any of the hams up in that location, but they knew there were in Guilford. They referred the police station in Guilford. They contacted myself. They asked me to send a message out to California, which I was able to do, to find out if her daughter was okay, because she just didn't know. And we sent the message for her, and it went from state to state to state to state,
right?
either by voice, by code, CW again, until it gets from one location to B, B to C, C to D, until it gets out there.
And finally got to
And
where it had
finally
to be.
got to where it was to find out where her daughter was and if she was okay, literally. And this was a health and welfare message at that time. I never heard anything further, so I assumed that she got the contact and it worked out okay.
Yeah.
But that was the one time that I had got involved with a emergency situation as compared to a routine situation.
Jim, years ago, you and I did a program on GCTV at Hammonasset.
Hammonasset, yes.
It was like a convention of ham operators.
Every year.
What was that? How many people were there? There were quite a few operators there.
Yes, that is where people get together.
That tape
hams.
exists
That's
somewhere,
Field
by
Day,
the way.
right?
Yeah.
I gotta,
Yeah.
Field
if
Day.
I go through
It
the
was Field Day.
archives, I might be able to pull that up.
Yeah, it was called Field Day. It's where all hams throughout the U.S. and into Canada make contacts with other hams using emergency power. Either it can be generator power, it can be that's the most common
Backup
power
battery.
source. Backup battery, yep, anything like that. And you're in outside conditions, and you're bringing, like we were underneath one of the tents out there, and we had different people
You had a
making
big group.
contacts.
How many people were there?
At that time, I think we had 20 to 30 people at that time.
Now, is that an annual event?
It's an annual event.
It's a
Usually-
it's a national event.
National, literally, yeah.
You do it there every year?
No, no. We've done it at the town hall in Westbrook the last 2 years because we have a radio there. We have an antenna on the roof, and we were able to do it.
That's
that.
their emergency operations center. And probably another thing to mention about Field Day is it is an
Are
opportunity.
you involved in that?
Yeah.
Yes,
It's an opportunity to essentially practice emergency operation communication skills,
Yeah.
and it's a competition because all of the clubs throughout the country that participate on that day are participating for points to do a variety of things in terms of the number of contacts they make by radio, whether they get the town officials into the site location to see what they're doing, just a variety of criteria, and it's a
And
competition.
you accumulate points?
Yes.
And what happens to the person that has the most points?
Go to Disney World. What else? What else would you do? No, I mean it's just a measure. You don't get any rewards or anything except the satisfaction, but it
Making
makes
contacts.
it interesting.
You're
It's
the
just
guy.
kind of like
You're the guy.
collecting QSL cards is
Right.
kind of a competition for some of the guys and ladies in the hobby.
And this is my QSL card, which I send when I make a contact with someone, and you can see the little stamp in the corner. It's called QCWA. That's called Quarter Century Wireless Association. And when you've been a ham for a minimum of 25 years, you can join that organization. And what that does, and there was the book that I have right here, there's different chapters throughout all the different states, and we're chapter 149, the Nutmeg State, and it tells about different events that take place, people that are involved in the hobby, and we get together every Sunday morning, as a matter of fact, on HF, which is high frequency, and we just talk. And again, you can talk about any subject
How
that you
many
want.
people of the week on Sunday morning?
On an average for that particular net, I would say there's probably about 20 people, 15 to 20 people.
Does everybody talk at the same time?
No. You've
You're
got a
polite?
net control. You've got a net control.
Net control
and-
makes sure that there's order in the
Right,
universe.
absolutely. And you just go
Maybe
one
the only
person at a time.
place.
Yeah, you go one person at a time, and they can again usually talk about the weather situations or how they made out during a hurricane.
And
what
what's the
equipment-
region that these people are?
These are all over. Well, for what we have, you've got all the states, as you can see, different chapters.
But on Sunday morning, who are you?
They're all over
Where are the
Connecticut.
people that you were-
Most of them are Connecticut. There's a few from out of state that are members. In other words, you don't have to be a member of QC, but you're on the list, so they get priority as far as making contacts. And again, you can talk about any subject. You have get-togethers, you have dinners. We've got the dinner coming up.
You do, huh?
Yep, they got one coming up in May of next year at the Westbrook Lobster in Clinton, and I'm going to be going to that.
All right.
But they have them up in Middletown, and you're getting to meet the people that you talk to because you talk to them all the time, and when you come face to face with
Sure.
them, it's a shock.
Yeah.
But it's a great organization, and we really enjoy
Is
it.
this
Can it-
gender neutral?
Yep.
Do you have women
We-
involved?
you've got
We would
women
like- we would
involved.
like
yes.
more women
And
involved,
We would
actually.
definitely. They would get
In
priority
fact-
on the air.
In fact, I'd
literally.
like to make a
At
shameless.
one time,
Yeah.
it was probably a male-dominated hobby. I'm guessing.
It probably was, but that's changed
That has
gradually
changed.
over the years. I
Yeah.
think the
What's the
number,
balance? What's the
I think probably
percentages?
25%, but I won't swear to that.
Yeah, if even
Not
that.
not enough. We'd like
None.
more women involved.
Yeah.
In fact, if I can make a shameless plug right now, because part of what we want to
There's the
do,
camera.
right? I mean, I know GCTV does not support commercials, But moms and dads, be the first to have junior and sis be the first ham operators on their block, because you can be a ham operator at any age and before you get your driver's license. And getting into the hobby costs a lot less than giving them a car, and it's a lot safer.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing,
Well, it costs a lot less than car insurance for a kid.
kids have become licensed as young as 10.
10, 12 years old.
And the
yeah.
beauty of
Yeah.
the beauty of this hobby is that you can take it from your very youth to your old age,
Yeah.
and you still participate actively.
Absolutely.
I don't know anybody who's needed a hip replacement because they've been a ham operator. So it's got a lot of advantages
Yeah,
over the course
it
of a
does.
lifetime.
Yep.
And we would really love to see more people get
Oh, yeah.
involved and do what we can to help them.
And when you're talking to a 10 or 12-year-old, do you have the same type of conversation, the same mutual respect, if you will?
We'd better.
Yeah.
They have different outings. They have the Boy Scouts Jamboree, it's called, every year, where people get on the air and they have, again, hams at the location, wherever they are out in the field, Hammonasset or wherever, because I was involved one year with my daughter. They had 4,500 scouts out there, and we made contacts all over the U.S. because it's called a pile-up. In other words, everybody wanted to talk to you, and it was nice to be on the other end of the pile-up, because I've been on many pile-ups where I was trying to compete with other people to get recognized, and the way they recognize you is you give out your call sign and then you wait. In other words, you don't jump on top of somebody else that's putting in their call sign. There is very good order on ham radio. And when they come back with your call, then you go ahead, make your transmission, tell where you're located, what kind of equipment, and you ask the scouts different questions. How interested are they in the hobby? How did they learn about it? What are they doing? What's coming up there? And it goes from there.
And one of the things that kids get a kick out of, you know, if they're licensed operators, talking to the International Space Station.
Yes.
Now, if you turned your radio on right now, could you talk to somebody?
Yes,
from here?
if somebody, oh yeah, I think so. If somebody were monitoring the frequency, they can. Now, these are...
We'll give it a shot, see if you can.
Okay, I can do that.
This is now it's a reality show.
Okay, this is Guilford, and what I want is Killingworth. Now, at the Route 81 traffic circle in Killingworth is what's called the 911 tower, just north of the circle, up about a half a mile, I'd say, up by the fire department. And on top
I know where it is, yeah.
Okay, and on top of that is the repeater. It's an antenna, and that's where we link into. So if I do this, press in.
Are you picking that up?
I can hear it way in the background, the code, the idea, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, the building may have too much metal that's
this is
serving the block
I know
out.
cell phones even. It's
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, here's Guilford. This is M1DIO Portable 1. Anybody monitoring frequency for Guilford? Not hearing it. N10FJ Mobile. Dave, good afternoon. We're doing a thing here in Guilford for GCTV, which is Guilford Public Access TV, and doing an interview with myself, Tony Fapiano, and Sid Gale of Guilford. And thanks very much for coming back to call. And incidentally, I was trying to reach you, but had no luck because your license, I don't think you're ready for renewal, but you had a message from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, which I was trying to pass on to you, and it was involved in getting with the SARC Club, but I couldn't contact you, Dave. Over.
He lives in Guilford?
No, you're. I think you're in Hamden.
Yeah, that's correct, Hamden. That's where I reside.
Okay, very good. Thanks for coming back on the call, Dave. I really appreciate this, and have a safe travel, sir. M10FJ, this is M1DIO, Guilford.
entertainment. And 1DIO and 1 OFJ Mobile.
7-3. Thanks for the call. Okay.
7-3 means?
Good wishes.
Good wishes, best of luck, whatever. Let me go back. Turn it off.
That's pretty neat. Yeah, that is something.
One thing to add, one reason that
Now, you seem to know this person.
I do.
Do you know who he is? Have
Yes,
you
I
met him?
do. Oh, of course. He's a member of our club.
Yeah, okay.
back around the time that I got licensed in the 90s, when cell phones weren't around, or not as they are today, one of the advantages of ham radio was that you could patch into the telephone system through the ham repeaters. So that was very valuable because essentially these were the precursors to cell phones, to wireless telephone communication. Just as
All right,
Morse code was the precursor to text messaging that we do today.
I think we've exceeded 30 minutes by now. We're going to try to wrap this up, but I'm sure there's 100 questions I haven't asked you. So like I do in many interviews, is there anything else that you think we need to discuss that would be important for people who are home watching this?
Just that I think it's an extremely interesting hobby, and it's something that people don't have to be technically sophisticated and expert at to get into. It's got a low threshold of entry, both in cost and expertise, and you can take it as far as you like to.
Absolutely.
For the entire course of your life. So it offers a lot for individuals and for families who would want to get involved in it. But before we run out of time, we would like to thank you for offering to do this program.
And our cameraman,
And our program, Justin Wood.
Justin, yes, thank you very much.
thank you so much for doing this.
And
Shannon
GCTV
Gale,
for
who
making it
obviously is
possible.
the operations manager here at GCTV, who
Yeah.
makes this all possible. Nothing happens here without Shannon.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And I'm not just saying that, Seth, because you're sitting there, but it's true. All right, so what else, Jim?
I think it's a great hobby, and it's something that you don't get tired of. There's always something happening. There's always new things that are being offered in the hobby, so you can get as technical or as simplified as you want, and it's not something that you're pushed to do every single day. You can do it when it's convenient for you, at your time, and you can make contact with people literally all over the world. On this little radio at home, I have a vertical antenna, which is up about 60 feet, and with that, I've got probably about a dozen different towns in Connecticut that I can get into with that outside antenna. I could probably put this mag mount antenna on the top of my car and probably get maybe half of them. And with the little antenna,
Mag mount means a magnet?
It's right on the car.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
right on the car, and it won't, we go 60 miles an hour, it won't come off. But you can make the contacts all over, and as you get closer to the other locations, you can go right into them without a problem at all. But it's a great hobby. You never lose interest.
Okay, I can see that. 31 years, right?
And 31 years for me, yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
What else, Sid?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay.
You've covered most of the
Yeah,
ground
you
there.
have.
Well, we
Yeah,
tried
great.
anyway. Again, I know nothing about this, but I know a lot more now than I
Good.
did.
We're glad.
An
And
inquisitive
appreciate you
mind
guys
takes
being
you a
here.
long
Yeah,
way.
thank you.
Yeah, and you might want to send once we know what the schedule is on Guilford Community Television, when this is going to be out, your people in Guilford can watch it if they have Comcast,
Yeah.
but they can also watch it online.
Ah,
That's correct.
Because
Okay.
GCTV is available online according to the scheduled time.
okay.
So you might want to send that out to your people. If they want to watch this program, they can watch it whether they're in Guilford or not.
Sure.
Okay.
And once
Wonderful.
again, contact information is coming up so that we hope anyone who has interest will take advantage of it and not hesitate to call.
Yeah.
All right. Hope
Yeah.
you are successful in doing that.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much. I
We
appreciate
appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much
Jim.
for the interview.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching. This is Tony Fapiano.